All right, so we don't have Cam Edwards, but we do, Cameron Gray, have Colonel Oliver North, who was in.
It's a good trade. It's a good trade.
It's a great trade. We don't tell Cam we traded up. I'm kidding, Cam, of course. Colonel North, thank you so much. You were in the building here, so we finagled you to come on the air with us for a few minutes.
Well, appreciate it.
And by the way, John, think about it. Ollie, how long have we known you? I mean, seriously, the three of us have known each other for so long. It's crazy.
It goes back to before I was at Fox with another network. It goes back to our relationship with G. Gordon, and it's a long time. We're talking decades.
I remember sitting in your house in a rocking chair many years ago.
That's right.
Very cool.
Right.
Awesome. So, Cameron, where would you like? Let's start with Colonel North.
Well, I mean, I think, of course, Colonel North, Ollie, if I may call you, there's so much discussion now about American Sniper and Chris Kyle. Before we recorded this, you said you finally saw the movie last night. Before you talk about the movie itself, I have a central tenet that I'm thinking about lately. It's that when you look online, you look at social media. I know you follow it as well too, and there's so much anger and hatred, and whether it be marches and blocking traffic, or hatred against guys like Chris Kyle in the military. But then you also look at record-breaking numbers in the box office. So in my mind, and I want to know what you think about this first, is that the lesson that we should take from this? Is that the American public are voting with their feet and by far support men and women in the military and people like Chris Kyle and people like yourself and the people who have served this country, and they are less inclined to support the traffic blockers and the people who put their arms through barrels full of concrete to stop traffic in Boston
or in D.C.
Of course, anywhere, any city.
Yeah. Look, I think the lesson, the takeaway from this movie is, one, the American people have enormous regard for those who have volunteered to put on the uniform and defend this country. The American people very often don't understand that this is the first time since the American Revolution where everyone fighting a war in a U.S. uniform, doesn't matter branch of service, every single person fighting this war is a volunteer. It's never happened since the Revolution. And it's never mentioned in the movie, but it's very clear that the motivation, certainly for Chris Kyle, and for those with whom he serves, both the Marines and the SEALs and the soldiers who are in this movie, have that same sense of purpose that those original citizen soldiers had back in the 1775 to 1781 fight for our freedom. Number two, they believe strongly in the need to protect this country from an enemy that's very blatant. This is radical Islam, words that the administration in Washington can't seem to say.
No.
Radical Islam is the enemy. They do horrible, terrible things. There are scenes in that movie, and I'm not saying this to brag or to complain. There are scenes in that movie that are very, very disturbing. I know. I was there with those units when all that happened. I was there for Fox News covering that part of the fight in Operation Iraqi Freedom. I knew some of the people in that movie well and personally. Mark Lee, for whom the SEAL base was named after he was killed. The SEAL base in Ramadi was named for him. There's the letter that Mark Lee's mother reads at the beginning of the movie and at the end. Mark Lee came to conclude that he had been there so long and so many times that he'd burned out, right? And eventually, Chris Kyle comes to the conclusion, I don't want to give away too much of the movie for those who haven't seen it, and I strongly recommend the movie. I mean, it's not just that it's very graphic, it's real. I watched it, and there were times when I could see exactly what happened on the ground because the technical advisors had been there on the ground. Right. Sergeant Major, who's the key technical advisor, is a Marine Sergeant Major retired. He was there. And so I look at that movie, it says to the American people, one, we have volunteers that want to defend us. Number two, the enemy is very evident, and the enemy does terrible things. I know that there's been a lot of mail and worry and hand-wringing over the fact that it shows what Chris Kyle and others had to do when children are sent out to blow them up.
Right.
Okay? And number three, it shows what happens when you've got a war that's gone on as long as it has, and that so many people have made so many deployments. I am not one that believes that PTS is a victim issue. I'm one who believes that post-traumatic stress comes with a lot of things. The person who kills Chris Kyle at the end isn't the enemy sniper. It is post-traumatic stress disorder, which is not properly or adequately treated. And so I look at that as the biggest part for me of what now needs to happen. And what now needs to happen is, one, the understanding of the American people as to who the enemy is. Number two, recognition of the heroic sacrifice being made by so many individuals in the line of fire and their families back home. And third, we darn well better do better at the VA than we've done.
You just talked about PTS, Colonel. We were talking before the interview that you were saying how it's as realistic as it gets, and you've been there, you've served this country, you've been there, and we were talking about the concept that it might be, could it be too real? You were talking about flashbacks and people who watched the movie who were there, seeing it and seeing something that's so graphic and so realistic that it could bring them back to that place. Can a movie be too real, and could it do something to them?
Probably. I don't think it's too real. I think the second part of your question is, can it do something to them? I say probably. I found myself at several moments in the movie, because I knew, not from the movie, but I knew from the real events, because we were there, the next thing that's going to happen is this. And at the moment when Mark Lee is killed, I knew what happened at that moment because we were there. And I said to Betsy, who was sitting next to me, and she's the one who wanted to go to the movie.
Wait, hold on a second. You didn't want to go?
No, because it's so real. I one, not only knew the end of the movie, because everyone who was paying attention to what's going on knew what happened to Chris at the end of the movie. Of course. But also because I knew what happened in the events in those movies, because I'd been to Fallujah, I'd been to Ramadi. We were there the day that Mark Lee was killed. And despite the way it's slanted in the movie, is that somehow Chris had become disenamored of what they were doing, and that Mark Lee had as well. I think more importantly, there's a recognition of, we have been at this so long. It is impossible to have guys out there as long as they were there, as repeatedly, without that changing them and their family relationships. And so when I saw that scene where Mark gets hit, I knew, and I said to Betsy, don't watch. And she said, why? I said, what? Mark Lee's going to get it here. This is what, and he did in the movie and in real life. Some of the stuff, to be technical about it, some of the things that show in the movie actually took place at night, but because of the difficulty in showing that on the screen, they put it in daylight. But that's about the only major difference between what happened and when it happened in reality and in the movie.
Speaking with Colonel Oliver North. Colonel North, slightly shifting gears on talking about this movie, American Sniper. I found, I don't know what word to start with, repugnant, disgusting, some of the comments from the people like Michael Moore and Seth Rogen about this. Uninformed, too, and just really... and then the pathetic
attempts to walk it back too, which almost makes it worse. Because the first thing they said is what they meant. Yeah. I think when you type something like that, that's what you mean. Yeah. And then to say, "Oh, I didn't really mean that," that's such crap. I mean, that's almost more insulting.
Look at any time you do something, a book, or a movie, or a television show that is pro-America. Pro-American military that makes our heroes look to be as heroic as they really are. Anytime you do that, you are going to get criticism from the left in America. I know. We've been doing war stories for over 14 years. Yeah. Okay.
And you've gotten a little criticism in your life, too.
Oh, no. I think I know
a tiny bit. And a modicum, sir.
From those guys, if I didn't get criticism, I would have failed in my mission. So, yeah.
What am I doing wrong?
Yeah.
And you mentioned war stories. I'll tell you what, that's on the Fox Business Channel a lot, and I love those stories. He did such a great job with war stories, I'll tell you.
No, I appreciate that, John. And I'll tell you something. I relish the job because I get to keep company with American heroes on every shoot. I
Right.
get to sit and listen to these guys, let them tell their stories, not about me, it's about them, and have those stories reflect the extraordinary character, integrity, perseverance, and courage, and the sacrifices of their family, which I think is very, very visible in this movie. When Chris Kyle's wife says to him, "You got to choose between them and me." My wife said that to me back 44 years ago. And we worked it out so that I continued to serve until 1988. I think that stuff needs to be in there so that the American people know that it is not just a service member. When we're overseas, even when I'm over there for Fox, the adrenaline's up, the camaraderie is there, the mutual admiration for one another is there, and you're 24/7 on point. You see what's in your grid square, and that's about it. Nowadays, you can do what you see in the movie. Pick up an Iridium, nowadays even a cell phone, go up on an account back at the base and Skype with your loved ones back at home. That kind of thing is important to understand. Most of all, it's important to know the stress that the family is under. And I think that portrays it vividly, without being maudlin, without being, oh, gee, they're all victims. It's understandable. If you're loved by someone and they miss you, they tell you.
Colonel Alan Roth is with us here on NRA News. Colonel, right now, as we speak, there's a huge situation in Yemen. There's shots fired at the embassy staffers. Presidential palace has been taken over. I think they're working on the prime minister's office. 5 or 6 days ago, the Obama administration released 5 Yemenis from Gitmo. Not to say that it's a one-for-one relationship, but we talk about, forget what's happening in Yemen now. Just talk about the concept of releasing people like this from Gitmo. The goal is to have 0 there soon. These are not good people. And when you see stories like this happening in Yemen, and 5 days ago Yemenis were released, it doesn't look good for the administration, but I don't think that really matters to them.
Cameron, first of all, it's clearly this administration's goal to close Gitmo.
Right.
If there was ever a time when the need to keep Gitmo open and put bad people in it, it's right now.
Yes.
Now's the time to fortify it,
Yes.
not open it up.
It displays for me a remarkable sense of wrong-headed thinking on the part of those who make the decisions in Washington. And sadly, we're not hearing from the Defense Department the fact that, and we should, the Secretary of Defense ought to be the one standing up to say, look, we've got to stop this, telling Congress the same thing. Where's the control of the purse strings in Congress? Turning these people out of Gitmo, one, puts more American soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines at risk, and number 2, precipitates the kinds of things we now see happening in Sana'a. And so if we're looking to make things more difficult for Americans, the country and those who are serving overseas who've now been specifically targeted, watch this administration put everyone at greater risk. It's absolutely unconscionable.
Colonel, we look at what happened at a chocolate shop in Australia. That kind of started this latest story. Then, of course, the horrors of the Charlie Hebdo shooting in France. We're seeing in Belgium, there was a raid that was apparently supposed to be the next France. We saw a raid in Greece. We saw a raid. It's just all over Europe. This is a huge issue, and of course, Australia. And in America, too. We're not dumb enough to think that there's people not here. And if you look up north to Canada, you look at the killing of Nathan Cirillo in Ottawa. This is a worldwide issue. Why is it so crippling for people to discuss this?
Well, it really isn't. I mean, it's crippling for this government.
For a lot of people to discuss. Well, for the people who lead this country to discuss it, and that's the most important people right now.
Yeah. Well, and look at Clausewitz said it 1,000, or Sun Tzu and Clausewitz both said the same thing. If you don't know your enemy, you will lose. We're on a path to catastrophe here because they cannot say the words radical Islam or radical Islamic terror. They can't say these words.
Ali, we're at a point right now where French kosher markets and French stores in Paris were told to close. In Belgium, there's pictures of armed guards in front of Jewish schools or guarding Jewish areas. Yeah. There's a heightened sense of security in places like Paris, in places like London. When you look at this, talking about forgetting our history, I mean, this really does harken back to World War II. I'm Jewish, and I take this stuff very personally. But when you look at what the anti-Semitism record numbers over the past few years, even before all this stuff started happening, what is happening with Jews in England is unconscionable, and we really are forgetting our history.
Well, just a few weeks ago, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff sat down with Fox News and said that our goal is to improve our intelligence, improve our relationship with our partners, and ultimately get back on with the business of destroying ISIS. Here's some reality. Number one, we have no human intelligence whatsoever because the administration has decided we're not going to capture anybody. We're going to kill people, to include American citizens, by the way, with Hellfire missiles fired from above. How is that working for you, Mr. Obama? Second, partners. The best partners we have on the planet Earth in countering terrorism are Israel, number one, and number two, al-Sisi, the president of Egypt. And yet both of them get the back of the hand from this administration. How do you build partners who know more about the problem? Al-Sisi's been very direct.
It's unbelievable.
As has Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu.
Yeah.
They're in the process of now having elections in Israel, okay? Yet when Bibi Netanyahu comes here, the president makes him cool his heels waiting for the meeting. Yeah. And you can see the blatant hostility. You can hear it in the things that they say. You've got to do this, or we're going to start withdrawing and maybe encouraging a boycott.
There was the hot mic, where Obama said, I got to deal with this guy. I mean, the absolute disrespect even of Israel is crazy. And you're right. It's the only in that area. It's nuclear hot right now. So we need a partner there, and we don't have one.
Nuclear is another issue.
Right.
I mean, just imagine how things are going to be if the Iranians succeed in acquiring. I mean, I wrote a book about it. It's called Counterfeit Lies, how they're getting the nuclear weapons and the means of delivering them. Ultimately, what we're seeing is a potentially catastrophic engagement with Iran, made so because of this administration, and number two, the explosive growth of radical Islamic organizations like ISIS. The administration is wedded to naming these little organizations because their narrative has been to tell everybody, oh, we've ruined core al-Qaeda. Look, it's not al-Qaeda.
And they make up new groups, too.
Exactly. It's al-Shabaab. Right. It is Boko Haram. Right. It is al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, which is Yemen. Yep. It is Jumaya Islamiyah in the Philippines and Indonesia. It'll go by any name that's convenient, but it's all the same. These are just franchise operations of what they've put in place to carry this war right to our bedrooms. And if you remember what Bibi Netanyahu said, it's coming to a theater near you, talking to us. When you look at what they can do in this country to attack particularly our transportation infrastructure, and I'm not talking about airplanes. Just try to imagine what it's going to be like if a bomb like what happened in Madrid back in 2005 or in London in 2007, if they end up bombing the metro system on the way over to Dulles, it'll shut down the Beltway, it'll finish the metro system out there, and this city will lock down like never before. And finally, I remind people, what happened in France, the words retribution, revenge, and, if you will, reprisal are all French words. They know that. And if you think those that they've captured are getting something like unenhanced interrogation, you'd be wrong.
Right. Colonel Oliver North, thank you so much. We could talk to you all day, but we got to let you go.
But before we let you go, do give a plug for Freedom Alliance, because you do amazing stuff there. You should definitely, we should talk about that for a second.
Thank you, brother. Well, Freedom Alliance, we just got back from a hero hunt. Took a young Marine out there who was a sniper, had never before fired a shotgun, except, the one you do 5 rounds in boot camp kind of thing.
Right.
And he was a sniper. Yeah, he is now an intelligence analyst. He's out of the Marine Corps, but still serving our country. He's out there missing a leg. And someone asked him, what are you going to major in college? And he said, well, I'm probably going to be a language major, but I know another sniper who has been with us on life of duty, Jesse, and his lovely wife, Emily, who was asked that question when he was going to Wake Forest. What are you majoring in? And he said, accounting. And the reporter said, wait a second, sniper, accounting? And his answer was, yes, sir, accuracy accuracy. It's wonderful to be with. They inspire me every time I'm out with them, and the things that we're able to do, thanks to the generosity of the American people. You know, we don't do ads. We don't have these big billboards. But for 25 years, Freedom Alliance has been helping them and the families of our wounded. And it's a great privilege to be able to look at what we've been able to do, thanks to the generosity of the American people, and stay in touch with these guys for the rest of our lives.
Colonel North, Freedom Alliance, Fox, NRA Life of Duty. I know you got to go. Do you have
The guy doesn't sleep.
Is your car running outside?
Seriously, you never sleep, Ollie.
And I drove my car. I'm a little concerned about driving my car up to New York when I have to go up there, because the mayor of New York is a card-carrying commie, and I'm really concerned he's going to have the car towed and put in one of those big smash
Could you
things.
imagine if de Blasio knew what your car was, and he would have NYPD tailing you
We
so
spot him
fast?
coming through the Lincoln Tunnel now.
Although the good thing is, I think no one in the NYPD likes him.
Yeah,
so
that's
I don't
true.
think-
You're probably
I don't
safe.
think it would work.
My hope is that they do like me.
You're much more liked in New York than their own
but
mayor.
the tow truck operator may not.
That's right.
Yes, yeah.
That's right.
Colonel North, thank you so much for being on
Thanks.
Cam and Company.
Good to be with you guys again. Thank you.